I have been sometimes disappointed wherein I do see elements of anti-Semitic thought within. I'm not saying this person because we don't know this person. You know, it's 200 people watching or so, and it's on the internet, so I don't know who's who on here. But that leads me to talk about. I have seen sometimes elements of anti-Semitism in some Christians, and it's always disturbing. Now that being said, from what I've seen, this is just strictly anecdotal now, David. You know, but from what I've seen, the people who tend to be the biggest supporters of Israel and the biggest allies of Jewish people in America and all over the world usually are evangelical Christians. You know, whether it's pray for the peace of Israel or the list goes on and on. But that's what I've anecdotally seen. But so it's always disturbing when I do meet someone who identifies as a Christian and yet harbors these feelings and sentiments and thinks it's perfectly okay. And there is, unfortunately, a precedent for that. You know, Michael Brown wrote the book, Our Hands Are Covered in Blood or Stained in Blood, about so-called Christian anti-Semitism. And, there's some disturbing stuff in there. Now, it gets tricky because sometimes people identify stuff as anti-Semitism that's not, and it can be just weaponized. Like with anything, people can play those cards. For example, sometimes people will make certain theological positions, such as if you hold to a new covenant theology or progressive covenantalism. I'm not going to get too deep into it, kind of technical stuff, but equating that with anti-Semitism or something like that, I don't think that's fair. But I do think there's such a thing as anti-Semitism, and we've seen it and heard it, and it should definitely be rooted way out of anything remotely Christian. But there's a lot going on, and the Christian church has just we're supposed to take the lead and show the example of what it looks like to truly be in a new body where there's equality at the foot of the cross. And that's what Galatians 3:28 is all about. There's neither slave nor free. And then you go down the list, male or female, Jew nor Greek, for we're all one in Christ. And then the very next verse says that, hey, man, if you're in Christ, you're of Abraham's seed. And that's really what we're supposed to be, that's what the church is supposed to be and who we're supposed to be. And we got to light the way. We got to share. We got to show what it's supposed to look like. We don't always do that. We haven't always historically done that, but I believe that we can. And I believe that a lot of Christians ultimately do, because anti-Semitism is real in this world. And I don't think it's going to be going away anytime soon, unfortunately.
No, I don't either. In fact, I see it very, very frequently online in people's comments and so on. All right, so we wanted to talk about Kanye because this, even though it's not, like, I only know like one Kanye song, so I don't know a lot about. It's that song. Can you guess which song it is?
Jesus walks.
No. We listened to that one day in the car. It wasn't enough for me to say that I know those songs.
Money.
Yeah. Yeah, because they play that in the gym. I haven't worked out in a while, except for a few times very recently. But back in the gym, they play that song all the time. So that's the only, and I thought it was hilarious that he had Jamie Foxx sing. I thought that was funny stuff. Yeah. So the only things I know about Kanye are back when Dave Chappelle said that Kanye came into the studio back when they were doing Chappelle's show, and he said he didn't know who Kanye was. Kanye wasn't famous yet, but Kanye was already acting like a genius. And Chappelle said it was hilarious that he would just, as they're doing something, he would go, "Stop, rewind that," and make them play something over, like he's running the show there. So there's that. Then there's obviously he was with Kim Kardashian. I thought it was hilarious when he was calling Pete Davidson Skeet Davidson. So there's that, and that he is apparently goes through mental health problems where he gets a little out there. And there was the MAGA hat thing.
Mm-hmm.
And that's most of what I know about Kanye until the recent White Lives Matter shirt So what are your, but before we actually get into any of the issues we'll be discussing here, because the reason we're discussing this is because this kind of overlaps, because I pointed out to VOCAB, I asked VOCAB because I said some of the stuff he's saying sounds like Hebrew Israelite stuff. And whenever there's something about anti-Semitism, I start thinking, why does Muhammad get a free pass on all of his stuff? Right. And so it kind of overlapped with some of our interests. So I said, hey, why don't we go live and actually have a discussion about some of this stuff? But thoughts on Kanye that are sort of separate from anything we're about to discuss?
Well, he was a producer in the background for a while, for other artists like Jay-Z and whatnot. And I guess he was like, this interesting lab technician kind of guy that would wear polos and be on the machines all the time. But then he started doing his own stuff and really blew up and was really instrumental in a lot of people's growing up hip hop. They remember Kanye as like the guy they looked to, like especially that album called College Dropout. And then he came on a lot of Christians' radar with the song Jesus Walks, which was a pretty dope song and had different people on it. People were like, oh, it's like Christian and they're talking about Jesus, But when you really listened to it and saw the other stuff he was doing, it was very contradictory. Fast forward years later, he put out an album, Jesus is King, the Blue Album. And it really sounded like he was blending gospel stylistically, but also gospel lyrics. Like it sounded a lot more Christian than a lot of Christian hip hop. Didn't have swearing, had some really good stuff on it. And it was such a positive thing. And that was around the time when he was doing this thing, Sunday school thing, where he would, get these big choirs together and be in these different places and have these big worship kind of sessions and whatever. And it was kind of like a really positive, interesting thing, and sonically sounded amazing as well. And a lot of things happened in that time, different pastors he was affiliated with. And off and on, you would also get these political statements that showed he thought different than what the mainstream might think a guy like him might think. And that's really all come to a head over the past month, really just a few weeks, though, where now, plus all that in the background, plus his tendency to say some different kind of stuff, like you said, he's saying stuff that sounds very Hebrew Israelite-ish, and that's going to include a dose of anti-Semitism. And so that's now injected into the conversation as well. And that seems to be, out of everything he's done, what's got him most in trouble. And so he's lost a lot of money in a short amount of time because of that. And
I saw a figure like something like $2 billion or something like that.
Yeah, that's what I heard too. And it was weird though, because did you see John McCrae's? He had a short video about Kanye recently, where a guy was interviewing him, and he said something about, well, let me give you my advice, and Kanye says, how much are you worth? Oh, and he says, well, no,
yeah. I did see when John posted that.
Even though I'm kind of rooting for Kanye, the good Kanye, not the bad Kanye, if that makes sense. Hopefully, people understand what I'm saying. When I saw that, I said, maybe the gentleman we all need to be humbled from time to time. Maybe this whole experience can humble him a little bit, because that was not a very, we'll just say, Christ-like attitude. Well, I have more money than you, so I don't need to take your advice. That's something the fool would say. And I think we all struggle with the fool and the wise man, kind of inside of this type of thing. And I feel like we see that with Kanye. But it's tough because the Hebrew Israelite stuff, he still was first and foremost a Christian. The Hebrew Israelite stuff, man, I think that's the source of a lot of his trouble, because that is a steady source of anti-Semitism. And it seems like these two things are tied in, from what I can tell in his quotes, although a lot of his quotes are very muddled. Yeah,
I have to say I'm rooting for Kanye as well, not because of this situation, because I always root for people who are high functioning mentally ill, right? Like, you could be mentally ill to the point where you're like institutionalized. But then you can be someone who struggles with mental health problems and so on, but you still can function in society. But that weirdness is always going to come out. So I'm someone like that. My brother Manny is like that, where, he sometimes needs to be, be institutionalized, because he starts thinking that everyone's conspiring against him and so on. So, right. And when that happens, I don't think, my brother's saying that everyone's conspiring against him. Shame on him. I think, okay, he's having some problems right now. And then, he'll eventually snap out of it. So in that regard, I hope Kanye gets through whatever issues he's having and is successful and so on. It's like it reminds me of like Tyson Fury, the boxer. You don't think you follow boxing much, but Tyson Fury, that guy was like messed up. I mean, he was messed up. He would go through like depressions and get on drugs and gain hundreds of pounds and stuff like this, and would get really nutty. And, in spite of all that, he came back and became heavyweight champion of the world. So he became heavyweight champion of the world, then lost all his belts because he just couldn't function anymore, was doing drugs and everything else, and then came back and became heavyweight champion of the world again. And so, and he's the same thing. That Tyson Fury has said some nutty stuff over some nutty, messed up stuff over there. And it's similar to, I guess, with Kanye, because, when back a few years ago when it was Kanye became, Kanye's announced that he's a Christian, he's making a gospel album and things like that. It was, there's this tendency to run out and say, hey, yay, we got a convert here. But you're looking at Kanye going, I don't know, man, that's not like the most stable dude in the world. So maybe not put him on a pedestal right now. Similar with Andrew Tate, right? So Andrew Tate just announced, Andrew Tate, the guy who says, that women are the property of men and you got to beat women and show them their place and all this stuff. Then he converts to Islam, apparently, because, it lines up with his values. And then, so I'm looking at the same situation like, guys, you might want to wait a few minutes to see how stable this new guy is before you parade him through the streets as your new poster boy. Right. They did not wait. They're parading him as their poster boy. And so we'll see how this actually turns out. And so, again, I don't know much, but would you say, is Kanye like a musical genius or something like that? I've seen people say that, but I don't know if they're just like exaggerating or something.
I mean, I think he's talented. The whole musical genius, I don't know. That's like a odd thing, but he definitely, he's in touch with the music. He's creative. He does some unique stuff. He's willing to explore new ways to get across ideas and set trends, not really follow trends. And he's willing to go out on a limb and be experimental and take chances. So in that sense, sonically, he's sort of a breath of fresh air. But he also puts out, I think some stuff that you could say, well, that's trash. He tries stuff and I don't think it doesn't work, or maybe he doesn't put as much polishing touch on some of the things he does, but in a landscape of a lot of garbage hip hop, sonically, I think he stands out, and he's stood the test of time. And it's pretty impressive to go from just kind of being a producer, a rapper, to this pop cultural sensation in a lot of ways, managed to stay relevant, which a lot of people think that's important. That's an interesting debate in and of itself, but he's, crossed over into fashion and other stuff as well. And so part of what's going on now is a lot of those deals and places that he's had ability to make a whole nother level of money versus just a guy who puts out music. A lot of that seems to be taken away now because of, people revoking sponsors and all like Adidas dropped him, stuff like that, because of things that he's been saying.
Yeah. And so, like you said earlier, it would be good if he took it as like, kind of wake up call, like, hey, I need to reevaluate some things, versus what he might be taking it as is, if he already thought there were like conspiracies going on, conspiring against him and stuff, and now, everyone's canceling me and stuff. Now, if you're in a conspiracy type mindset, it's, I was right? So, isn't this weird? So you can have a conspiracy theory and then announce your conspiracy theory with a lot of messed up stuff in it. And then people's like, whoa, we can't work with you anymore. But in your mind, that confirms the conspiracy theory, right? Aha, right. You proved me right. So, so we're going to go through a bit of this and then touch on some of the issues that where this crosses over with some of the stuff that we're normally thinking about. All right, so what we have, first, let's go back to the White Lives Matter shirts. So you're familiar with this, right?
Yeah, this is him and Candace Owen during, Paris Fashion Week or something. By the way, a few people said your microphone was a little quieter than mine.
Did they say that earlier? Because I moved it around a bit.
Okay, so they said that earlier. I haven't seen yet.
Okay, I've moved mine.
Okay. Okay. I'm gonna make sure everyone sees my shirt.
Well, I got a picture on the screen right now.
Oh,
Hang on, I'll take it back down. No, show everyone your shirt. I was predestined to wear this shirt. Spoken like a true Catholic.
Well, today is Reformation Sunday.
I thought
October 31st.
I thought last week was Reformation Day, man.
No, that's when I did my sermon on it
back.
because that's when we had the time. But October 30th is Reformation Sunday, and Reformation Day is tomorrow. October 31st, 1517, Luther, although this is Calvin, nailed the 95 Thesis. So just shout out to all the people who celebrate Reformation Day today and tomorrow.
Did you hear what he just said? Hey, you Calvinists, you're all blessed.
Amen. Amen. Yeah, I do see a lot of people who are like, isn't what's happening to Kanye just proving everything that he said is true?
Well, that's the thing. I mean, notice that would be like saying, isn't Alex Jones being canceled after saying that all those families whose kids were massacred and he said it was a conspiracy? Doesn't him being canceled, doesn't that prove that he's right? It's like, nah, I mean, if there were an actual conspiracy, you could say, hey, that conspiracy may be able to shut people down, but you'd have to take a closer look, because if someone says some really messed up stuff that companies don't want to associate with, I mean, so Adidas canceling, I mean, do you really want to face the backlash for being associated with the tweet and some of the theories we're about to look at? But let's go back to this White Lives Matter real quick, since everyone's showing off their shirts now. So we got White Lives Matter.
Yeah, the Calvinism shirt is not White Lives Matter. It's Some Lives Matter.
What's wrong with you, man?
I'm just kidding. Someone's going to take that so serious.
So, White Lives Matter. A lot of people cheered for Kanye, and a lot of people flipped out about this. So, why do you think people were flipping out about White Lives Matter? I mean, don't White Lives Matter?
I mean, I don't know. This is a fashion week. Is this supposed to be a fashion shirt? Because that seems super basic.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, it's like they got a white version and a black version there. That's pretty cool. Yeah, so yeah, let's just briefly touch on, because this goes back a while. With you had Black Lives Matter, and then people would respond with All Lives Matter, and then the people who were saying Black Lives Matter get upset. Hey, you're saying All Lives Matter, and then but when you flip out over saying All Lives Matter, the other side goes, what? You're saying that all lives don't matter? What's going on here? So what are your thoughts on all this? And then I want to actually take a quick look at a Bible passage.
Well, I mean, I saw the Tucker Carlson interview, and he said, well, why do you say this? He's like, well, because they do. And it's like, okay, yeah, I mean, people are made in the image of God. So if we're made in the image of God, then it's true that all lives matter, but not the organization, but the actual phrase. When you talk about Black Lives Matter, I think the best charitable reading of it is to say, hey, if we're concerned about things like police brutality in our communities, Black Lives Matter is supposed to be shining I'm saying in the most charitable reading, it's supposed to be shining a light on that problem. And so some people want to argue, they say, well, first of all, there's not a problem there. Second of all, it's maybe racist to point out one, but the idea is drawing attention to a particular problem. I'm not saying it's identical, but maybe if we said something like unborn lives matter, or we're not saying that other lives don't matter, it's just saying here's an area in society where we see this under threat or a problem. So, I mean, I have a lot of stuff is a mixed bag, because the actual Black Lives Matter organization, I can't have any part of. Yeah. I could, if you actually read what they say and things they've had on their website, they've taken some of the stuff down they've had on the official website. And also they've shown themselves, frankly, to be apparently a corrupt organization.
Oh, totally.
Yeah. So I mean,
and I would say unquestionably, they released their financial statements, and this was in Candace Owens' documentary. It was actually like the last 20 minutes of the documentary that is really like something that everyone could agree on. When it was, she went through how they spent that $90 million or whatever they got, and they were buying tons of properties. It looked like everyone who's friends with them just instantly started some organization that doesn't actually do anything and doesn't function, and then they got millions of dollars. And so it looks like they spread the money around to friends and then used it to buy properties and things like that, and then like a bunch of it, tens of millions, they just stuck in the stock market. So nothing says sticking it to Whitey like nothing says bringing down the white system like Wall Street. Which you know what I mean? I just want to say, you know what's weird is, like, I mean, I wouldn't have any problem with someone buying houses and investing in the stock market and something if you got it like that. But the idea that, hey, give this money to us so we can go help the black community, and then, by black community I mean me and my friends, and we're all gonna buy tons of stuff and invest the rest in the stock market so we have plenty for the future.
Yeah, and there's an interesting thing as well that I don't know if a lot of people know about, where one of the guys who was at the center of one of their recent, situations where they had a financial corruption shown, the guy who actually was involved with it was a Hebrew Israelite, someone who claimed to be, part of Black Judaism that was in the organization. I'm gonna look for his name because a lot of people don't know about this. I almost covered this, but I never ended up doing anything on it. But it's pretty interesting that there was actually a guy who apparently was some form of a Hebrew Israelite involved in one of their latest scandals. Let me find this guy's name real quick. Because
you go ahead and bring that up, and I will bring up sort of my thoughts on here. Because notice, if you say Black Lives Matter, you would think, if you're just examining that without any context, if you believe Black Lives Matter, you'd say, of course. And if someone were to say all lives matter or something like that, you would say, yeah, of course. And so the disputes around it have more to do with like the context of what's being said. And so let me just give an example with the Beatitudes here. So the Beatitudes, this is, hang on, someone's trying to call me here. The Beatitudes, and he lifted up his eyes on his disciples. This is from Luke. This is Jesus. And he lifted up his eyes on his disciples and said, "Blessed are you who are poor, for yours is the kingdom of God. Blessed are you who are hungry now, for you shall be satisfied. Blessed are you who weep now, for you shall laugh. Blessed are you when people hate you, and when they exclude you, and revile you, and spurn your name as evil on account of the Son of Man. Rejoice in that day, and leap for joy, for behold, your reward is great in heaven. For so their fathers did to the prophets." Now, if you look, I mean, he's talking to some marginalized or groups that, could be looked down on, or who would feel bad for various things, if you're just feeling hungry or something like that. But notice, so blessed are you who are poor. Now, he's flipping things on their head, because normally you would think, oh, look how blessed this rich person is with this big house and plenty of money. This person is really blessed. The poor person, not blessed. I'm going to pray for the poor person to be blessed or something like that. And if you're hungry, you normally say, hey, this guy has plenty of food, plenty of stuff, plenty of money. But the hungry guy, we need to pray for him. And, if you're weeping, if you're persecuted, if you're excluded, if you're reviled, if you're spurned as evil for him, you think, hey, it's the opposite of the people who are described in this passage that a lot of people, especially back then, would think of as blessed. You're doing well, everything's going well for you, you're really blessed. And that's true. And Jesus said, no, actually, blessed are the poor. You're blessed. You're blessed in a different way, but you're blessed. Blessed are you who are hungry. But just imagine someone there. Jesus stands up and says, in a culture where someone who's very wealthy would have been viewed as blessed, and he says, blessed are you who are poor. well, he's trying to say something. He's trying to say something. He's trying to make a point about poor people being blessed in a certain way. Imagine a rich guy there going, we're blessed too. We're blessed too, Jesus. It's like, I'm trying to make a point here. Trying to make a point about poor people, and trying to alter people's thinking on issues like being poor, being hungry, or being persecuted or something like that. I'm trying to tell you in a very important way, you're blessed if you're in these situations. And someone could just like totally try to throw that off, but no, people who aren't crying are blessed too. People who are wealthy, people who have plenty of food, they're blessed too. It's like, we weren't arguing about it. I'm talking about these people who are like downtrodden over here. And so I kind of think of it like that. Like, if you say all lives matter or something, you're saying something that's true. But again, the organization aside, which is messed up, the slogan Black Lives Matter in response to issues involving police or whatever it gets pointed out as, you're trying to make a point there. You're not saying no lives matter apart from Black lives. And so, I wonder what Kanye was thinking with that. He said he was just stating, I said it because it's true. I mean, you could say all kinds of things are true. If you're putting something on a shirt and stepping out there, there's more to it than that. But so I get people who were frustrated at that because, again, for me, it would be like Jesus says, blessed are the poor. And someone says, blessed are the rich too, Jesus. Why aren't you talking about the rich? All people are blessed, Jesus. But what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, Kanye, it's funny. He says on one hand, years ago with, Austin Powers, remember Mike Myers during the Katrina victims when they're trying to raise money, and he goes, well, because George Bush doesn't care about black people. Remember he said that?
Yeah, and, right before we're going live, I was going to pull up some clips from his interview with Lex Friedman. And Lex actually brought that up and said, hey, in the same way you're saying that, then I could say you don't like Jewish people, you don't care about Jewish people because of the things you said.
Well, he said that years ago, and then he'll say stuff like that. But then he says slavery was a choice. He said that as well in an interview. Slavery sounds like a choice to me, like as if Africans chose to be enslaved because they didn't get free sooner. Seem to be so he can be all over the map. With some of these kinds of statements. And we applaud some of the good things he says because he's willing to go out on a limb, which a lot of these folks aren't. So when he attacks Planned Parenthood, mm-hmm. and when he talks about the fact that abortion really destroys black lives, especially at a mm-hmm. disproportionate rate to the rest of the population, that's a tragedy that does need to be exposed. And so we applaud that. But then there's this other stuff. So, yeah, it's like pray for Kanye, but man, you can't be so prideful, Kanye, that you can't listen to anybody. And then the people you do listen to, some of the information he seems to be getting is from Hebrew Israelites, which is not good. But real quick, I do understand, this is a brief thing where the guy who stole $10 million from BLM appears to be some kind of practitioner of Black Judaism. Look at this.
Sole control over the board is someone named Shalomia Bowers. He is not white. He is a Black person who practices Judaism and does not really connect with Black community. In fact, when we were in a more cordial relationship, he shared with me that he'd never even been to a protest. So this is who's kind of at the helm. You'll see that his firm, Bowers Consulting.
And that's the guy who stole the $10 million. It's just interesting. Now, what kind of, Hebrew is he exactly? I don't know. But that was his IG profile. Mm-hmm. Shalom Yah Bowers. Look at that name, Shalom Yah. L'chaim. It may be more of Black Judaism than like Hebrew Israelism as we understand it, but it's just interesting. That was the dude who apparently did the $10 million fraud at the national level. Anyways.
Yeah, so we're going to check out Kanye's tweet that got him in a lot of trouble here in a few seconds. I'm thinking, because when I saw the White Lives Matter shirt, I was thinking, when he explains it, he just says, I said it because it's true, or I said it because it's obvious, and my dad taught me to say things that are true and obvious, and he supports me and things like that. But when I see something like that, I think, is is this person trying to get media attention right now? Because you can do that, right? That's one way to be in. That's one way to get all over the news really quickly. If you've got a new album or product or something coming out, you can get yourself in the news. In fact, I mean, you could do way more advanced stuff like that. And years ago, like when, I mean, I think the biggest example of this that I could think of off the top of my head would be Trump, when it was during the primaries. Because I didn't watch news programs back then and so on. I didn't watch TV back then, so I would see TV when I went to the laundromat, right? So I'd go to the laundromat every week with laundry, and I'd walk in there and they'd have the TV on, a news station, and it's during the primary again, and all they would be talking about is the latest like insane thing that Trump said, right? And I was like, whoa. Right. This guy's not gonna be the nominee, right? And I'd go home. The next week I come in there, they're talking about Trump the entire time on the news. I go home. The next week I come back, they're talking about Trump the entire time. And like the third time I was like, wait, is he doing this on purpose? Is he like purposely like constantly giving them something to point out, to complain about, so that he's always in the news? Because that's one, the saying that any publicity is good publicity. Why is everyone calling me right now? No one ever calls me, and now everyone's calling me. But so they say, all publicity is good publicity. I don't think that's really true, but you can get a lot of free airtime if you're constantly giving people material. But then there's this higher level, you could call it a strategy or manipulation, depending on your perspective on the person doing it. But there's like a higher level, let's call it manipulation tactic, where if you have two groups and they're like polarized, right? Like they don't like each other. Two ways to go about it. One, you could show one side that you're their guy because you're going to do all these things that they agree with. But the other way to go about it is to enrage the opposite side so much that you become the ultimate enemy of their enemy. You know what I mean? Like if you're the ultimate enemy of a group that is their supreme enemy, you can become the champion of the other group. Like, hey, we don't have to know much about him. We know that this other side really, really hates and despises this guy. And so that is a tactic. And so back then I was looking at this, not paying a lot of attention to politics, but looking at this, and he's always in the news, and I'm thinking, does he just blurt these things out or because he means them, or is he doing something else? And so I don't know, because I've never followed it enough to know. And so when I see Kanye with White Lives Matter, I think, oh, is he trying to enrage the other side to make himself the bigger champion of the opposite side, or what's going on? That's not what he says he's doing. And you can't. It's hard to get a read on someone with mental health issues. But
remember, he did briefly run for president, and he said he's going to do it again.
He's made oh yeah. If he loses, it's going to be because of a Jewish conspiracy, right? Let's go ahead and check out this tweet. So Kanye's tweet. So he said, "I'm a bit sleepy tonight, but when I wake up, I'm going DEFCON 3 on Jewish people." So that's the part that got him in trouble. But the reason I asked you about the connection to Hebrew Israelites is the next part. It says, the funny thing is, I actually can't be anti-Semitic because black people are actually Jew also. You guys have toyed with me, talking about Jews there, you guys have toyed with me and tried to blackball anyone who ever opposes your agenda. So, DEFCON, now that's creepy because it's actually, it's DEFCON, DEFCON, right? It's DEFCON, and that stands for I forget what it stands for. It's Defense
Readiness Condition.
Yeah, DEFCON. So the DEF is for defense.
There's 5 levels to it, and they got colors associated with them, and it's your state of readiness or alertness.
Yeah, so DEF is for defense, and CON is for condition. And so to say DEFCON, now he probably thinks it's DEFCON, right? But saying you're going DEFCON 3 on Jewish people, I can see why some companies would not want to get it. And again, I come from
and then all caps on Jewish people.
Like
that's
he's
in
yelling
all
it.
caps.
Yeah. So on the one hand, I understand companies saying, can't deal with that. On the other hand, as someone who has a lot of experience with mental illness, if he's going through a period of some mental problems, then you'd say, okay, he's not fully in control of his faculties at that point. He doesn't sound like he's apologized, but it doesn't sound like he's saying, hey, I'm just crazy or something like that. So I'd be somewhat sympathetic, not to the idea, but okay, if this person is not in his right mind when he's saying this, then he could point that out. But at the same time, even if he's just not in his right mind, that doesn't represent his actual views. If he gets out of this phase a couple months from now or something like that, then you'd still say, hey, if I'm a company like Adidas or something like that, I do not want to be tied to someone who's going to blurt out stuff like that every time he's going through a rough patch. You just can't. You need some stability or something like that.
Right. Now, there are people coming saying, well, Kanye has a history of saying things like this. Now people are coming out, and apparently there's examples of other interviews where the interview was heavily edited to take out some anti-Jewish stuff. I guess there was a Letterman interview they're saying that was the case with, and some stuff like that now. So people were saying that. We don't know about all that, but it was interesting because one of the things that really started this too was in regards to the White Lives Matter. Tucker Carlson interviewed Kanye, and he said a couple odd things during the interview, to put it mildly, but the stuff that was edited out, somehow some of it got leaked, and that was the stuff that included more interesting or incendiary stuff as well, including some stuff you could say, wait, that's Hebrew Israelite type stuff. And that was interesting too. So I did a show on this. We did some analysis of it. It was Kanye West Talks Hebrew Israelism, explaining Kanye West's Hebrew Israelite rhetoric. It was a couple weeks ago when this all jumped off or something. But years before that, I did a show on Kanye West. When I say years, what was the date on this? I can't tell right now. How do you even see the date on your own streams? I can't even see the date on my own stream, but
they keep changing stuff to me. Makes it hard.
This is three years ago, and I titled it "Kanye West Going Hebrew Israelite: 400-Year Prophecy." So 3 years ago, he was saying some stuff that was toying with the idea of the 400-year prophecy, which is something that some Hebrew Israelites believe about the year 2019, and now they've changed a little bit because really nothing happened in 2019. In relationship to 1619 to 2019, if you remember, we did a video in VA once that was about the 400-year prophecy. Well, Kanye was toying with that, so I did a program explaining some of the stuff he was saying, but it kind of went under the radar at the time, and it didn't seem to have the anti-Semitic statements. I just caught wind of this is some Hebrew Israelite stuff. But in the Tucker Carlson interview, he still first and foremost identified as a Christian, but then said, as a Christian, I also believe that I'm a Jew, but
that's what I was wondering about, because let's go back to, and this is why I wanted you to join me here. But so he says, I'm a bit sleepy tonight, but when I wake up, I'm going DEFCON 3 on Jewish people. The funny thing is, I actually can't be anti-Semitic. He says it's impossible for him to be anti-Semitic because black people are actually Jew also. So in the little bit that I did look at, here he's saying black people are Jews. But when I've seen him address why he's calling himself a Jew, it was because I'm a Christian. And so there you could actually, you could find a coherent point, right? Because you could be saying, we're grafted into the same tree, right? We're Christians are grafted through Jesus Christ into the same tree. But so it sounds like he's saying two different things. One, that he's Jewish because he's a Christian, but there it sounds like he's saying he's a Jew because he's black, which sounds like Hebrew Israelite stuff.
Well, yeah. So here's another quote. Listen to this one. This one wasn't in the tweet. This, I believe, was from the Tucker Carlson interview, and I can't remember if this part was cut or not, but it was from that Tucker Carlson interview. Quote, Planned Parenthood was made by Margaret Sanger, a known eugenics, with the KKK to control the Jew population. So, Planned Parenthood, which is primary service it offers, of course, is killing babies, abortion. And Margaret Sanger, the founder, was a eugenicist, which is, this idea of controlling certain populations and trying to find out what traits you want to have in a society and all this stuff, and working towards eliminating human weeds. And that's true, and of course, PP tries to distance themselves from that. And then it says to control the Jew population. Now, look, he explains what he means by that. When I say Jew, I mean the 12 lost tribes of Judah, the blood of Christ, who the people known as the race black really are. This is who our people are. So there, I think it's a lot more clear, even though there's some muddiness in this clip. He's identifying Jew with black. Here's the muddiness. 12 tribes of Judah. It would be 12 tribes of Israel. Usually Hebrew Israelites will a lot of times identify themselves as Judah. But there he's got 12 lost tribes of Judah. Judah is just one of the 12. But then he says the blood of Christ. So that means of the same type or lineage or stock, who the people known as the black race really are. So there it seems to be identified directly with that, which that's basically a Hebrew Israelite idea. But I do want to point out, like Nate pointed out in the live chat, it did say black people are Jews also. Funny thing is, I can't be innocent because black people are actually Jew also. You see what I'm saying there? Also, that's a key word. If he means what he said there, that's not harsh Hebrew Israelism. That's kind of a mild Hebrew Israelism there.
Yeah, maybe because there will be people for whom this is new information and aren't familiar with what the Black Hebrew Israelites teach. So, I mean, this will sound very weird, and vocab, you can give us the nutshell version of it. But notice, we're familiar with Jewish people in the world. Imagine someone imagine a Japanese guy coming along and saying, the Japanese are the real Jews. You'd be like, what? Yeah, because lost tribes, and we're a lost tribe or something like that. Or By the way,
there are a group of Japanese who say they're the real Jews.
That's interesting.
There really is, but go ahead.
So I'm a quarter Norwegian. I can imagine like Norwegians coming along and saying, we're the true Jews, or any other group in the world who doesn't seem to be Jewish. Whereas, it's weird because if he were saying there's some mixture or something like that, then that would make sense. Like, I'm actually a very small part Jewish. I'm 2.7% Jewish. I had one of those DNA tests. So 2.7%, something like that. That's not because I'm, I wouldn't call myself Jewish because of that. There's just almost everyone's mixture of something at some point. But that's not what the Black Hebrew Israelites are saying. It's not, hey, we have some, we had some ancestor who came down or something like that. Who, in other words, they're not saying, hey, I had some Jew, like we normally think of Jews, who came down and his DNA was mingled with the rest of the, population of this African country or something like that. It's that Jews, as they really, you could correct me if I'm wrong here, Jews were actually black centuries ago, and then they ended up in Africa, and the people, is this the claim? The people who claim to be Jews now are not. They were from some other group that then took over the identity of Jews.
Yes, you got it. So let me read a brief excerpt. This is a book by a Hebrew Israelite named Jael. Who are the Gentiles? Jeremiah, Israel. For Israelites, by Israelites. And look, he's got a Ashkenazi man ostensibly on the cover, right? Just want to read a page from page 109 here. Jesus, let me. So there's going to be a lot of anti-Semitic stuff, but you're going to see this is Hebrew Israelite proper, not Kanye's muddy version. The scriptures prove that the people in the land called Israel today are not God's chosen people. They are converts, not bloodline Jews. They only trace their heritage through their mothers and not their fathers. Both scientific and biological evidence shows us that many of the Jews in Israel are from the Ashkenazi bloodline. They are from Poland and Russia by birth. We read the Bible scriptures earlier that showed us Ashkenazis was one of Joseph's sons, and the Bible refers to them as making up the Isles of the Gentiles. These are the true bloodline Gentiles of the Bible. It is impossible for the Jews claiming they are Jews around the world to be Jews when they are of Ashkenazi descent. Anywhere in the Bible does it say God's chosen people were from Europe, Russia, or Poland? It is such a joke, and people fall for it. They will fall for anything. They do absolutely no research whatsoever. The highest percentage of Ashkenazi bloodline on ancestry DNA websites belongs to Europeans. They are part of what makes up Gentiles in the world today. We, Jeremiah and Jael, are not saying this. It is coming from their mouths. So he's saying they're even admitting that they're frauds is what he's saying there. But that's a perfect example. So yeah, the ancient Israelites lost their identity when they went into Africa. And then the people now who claim to be Jews, according to this schema, which I don't agree with, it's one of the main things I fight against, are actually frauds, imposters, usually of Khazar descent or Edomite descent, specifically Amalekites, or perhaps Japhetic. But in any way, whatever it is, not Semitic. That's the Hebrew Israelite claim. But Kanye has a milder version where he's saying, it seems, Jews also are, and us too. Usually Hebrew Israelites have one or the other. And unless Kanye is accidentally putting in the word also, he seems to be indicating, yeah, they are, but so are we. But we'll see. We'll see if he continues on and explains it further. I hope he doesn't go hardcore more Hebrew Israelite. You know what I mean? It's bad enough as it is.
Yeah, and so break this down for us. So there were obviously black people in Africa before the Exodus or anything like that. And so is the claim that there were already people in Africa, but the Jews are a specific group of black people, and then like during the captivities and so on, then they ended up in Africa, and so they're black, but they're Jews, and they're around other blacks, and then the black people who were Jews ended up being taken to North and South America as on slave ships. Is that
yeah,
correct?
that's most versions Hebrew Israelism have that as their backstory. So they would be around other people on the continent of Africa, but some would be essentially native and others who had been transferred during the destruction of Jerusalem. So I just read a book the other day that's a really famous Hebrew Israelite book by Rudolf Windsor, and it's called From Babylon to Timbuktu. And he makes the claim without any sources that it says 1 million Jews during the fall of Jerusalem when it happened there, 70 AD under the Roman Empire. 1 million Jews fled into Africa. He doesn't give any sources. He doesn't say where in Africa they went. None of that. And here's what's interesting about that, for example. But this is a common thing that they'll say. If you read Tacitus, Roman historian, he talks about the siege of Jerusalem towards the end of one of his histories. And when he talks about it, he estimates that there's about 600,000 people in Jerusalem. Well, if Tacitus' numbers are anywhere near right, 600,000 in Jerusalem, then how could 1 million flee into Africa? You know, I mean, this is the siege of Jerusalem, and this is when people are mainly talking about. Do you see what I'm saying? There's real problems with the way they put it, because they've got to get Africa, certain parts of it, really populated heavily, so then these same folks can be taken over into the slave trade. And the basic claim is the folks who went into the slave trade, those are the Israelites. The ones who didn't get taken usually aren't. But there are other versions of Hebrew Israelism, which include a lot more Jews on the African continent as far as the theory will go. For example, another guy that's in the news right now, Kyrie Irving, he tweeted a movie based upon a book, which you can get on Amazon Prime. And in that, that guy, he actually believes that most of Africa seems to be populated with Israelites. In fact, he actually thinks that Israel is actually in Africa. He actually thinks the country has been switched as well. And Kyrie Irving of the Brooklyn Nets tweeted this guy's documentary called From Hebrews to Negroes. and he put it out there, right? And the Rolling Stone did an article on this Kyrie Irving discussion and tweet where he's tweeting this. So this has just happened a couple of days ago. So these are like mainstream ideas, where ideas, Hebrew Israelism's ideas are getting mainstream. But yeah, that's the basic essence of Hebrew Israelism. And so usually they say the people known as Jews are frauds. Like here's an example of a book, The Jewish Masquerade. I mean, look at the cover of this. The Relationship Between Modern Jews and Ancient Hebrew Israelites by John Brinson. The whole point of this book is that modern Jews are imposters. That's what he's saying. So usually that's the way they go with it. But Kanye doesn't seem to be going all the way there. Although he is saying other stuff that is clearly anti-Semitic, whether he thinks they're Jews or fraudulent or not. This ain't a game. I'm going to use you as an example to show the Jewish people that told you to call me that no one can threaten or influence me. I told you this is war. Now I'm going to get you some business. I just think that's what they're about, is making money. That's a reference to Jared Kushner and apparently kind of perhaps all Jews, because he also said to Tucker Carlson, I prefer my kids' new Hanukkah from Kwanzaa. At least it will come with some financial engineering. Just sort of like I don't know, some of these are almost like backhanded compliments, but like this is the kind of stuff he's saying along with it. But a lot of this stuff is common Hebrew Israelite fare that he's saying, So it's not just Kanye, now it's Kyrie.
Oh man! Someone just posted during the Kanye interview. He was asked by his Jewish handler, "Have you been to the Holocaust Museum?" Kanye responded, "Have you visited Planned Parenthood? Because that's our Holocaust Museum."
I think he did say something like that.
Yeah. It's interesting the parallel between Kanye and the Black Hebrew Israelites for basically emotional reasons, because you know this, the last time you and I went out and talked to some Hebrew, I was just standing there holding the camera, but when you were asking them to defend a claim they were making, the leader of that group just started saying, but I was enslaved, and he started running down what had happened to Black people in the United States. And you pointed out, you say, hey, that's true, but that has nothing to do with defending your point. This is an appeal to emotion. In other words, look how oppressed I am, therefore agree with what I'm saying. But it seems to be something like that with the Black Hebrew Israelite, because the actual arguments are pretty silly. You don't have scientific evidence that you go back to Israel and so on. So it's more along the lines of, it looks like, hey, we've been oppressed. Jews were oppressed in the Bible and we identify with them, but now we're actually going to claim to be them. And so it seems to be grounded in emotion and then trying to justify it rationally. But with Kanye, it seems similar with his comments, because again, I saw part of his discussion with Lex Friedman, who's Jewish, and Kanye was saying that basically in his business dealings over the years, when he gets into an argument about something that's being done or a contract or something, someone will say, he'll say, I'm going to expose you over what you've done in this agreement. Mm-hmm. And they would say, according to him, if you do, we'll call you an anti-Semite or something like that. So he's interpreting this. So he gets angry over this over years. And he gets angry about this over years and then starts, it sounds like what he's saying is that Jews are weaponizing the Holocaust in order to block criticism for things they're doing. And he's interpreting that as like this conspiracy. And he's mad about that. And so I'm thinking of the parallels in terms of something where you're enraged at someone for doing something, and then that starts affecting your thinking about the group and who you are. And then the Hebrew Israelites come along and say, hey, we're actually the true Jews here. And I don't know, it looks like that, like he's just had some bad experiences and so on. And then he's concluding that there's a conspiracy, because he was pointing out when Lex was talking, Lex was like, look, when you talk about Jewish controlled media and Jewish controlled this and Jewish controlled that and these conspiracy theories, That's dangerous talk. That's dangerous language. And Kanye's pointing out, like, what are you talking about? Look at all the Jewish men who work in these companies and so on, who are these CEOs and so on. And, you know, that's weird to conclude because there are, let's say, disproportionately more Jews, let's say, you know, as Hollywood executives and so on. Therefore, it's a conspiracy. That's weird thinking. That would be like, I mean, when I was in college, there were disproportionately more Indians and Asians going into computer engineering and so on. I don't think, there's a conspiracy. There's a conspiracy among Indians and Asians to take over technology. It seems like in your culture that was just more emphasized to have jobs like that than it was in other places. And so you tend to gravitate, if you're trying to think about what you're going to do, you tend to gravitate towards things that are highly valued in your culture or in your family. And notice it's not, why would you look down on that, right? Why would you think, look at all these Indians and Asians going into computers, shame on them, and so many of them are going into engineering. It's a conspiracy. Why don't you not think, well, you know, good on them for going out and getting some really high paying jobs and so on. And similarly with you know, Jews in Hollywood or whatever you want to say it as part of a conspiracy theory, banking or this and that. Why is it not just like, hey, you know, culturally they wanted to get in jobs like that, and that's not a bad thing to become doctor, lawyer, executive, things like that. But there's this. It seems that what's going on is he's looking and saying, so many of the people I interact with when I'm doing these business dealings are Jews that it looks like they're controlling everything behind the scenes, rather than, okay, they keep getting really good jobs in the entertainment industry or whatever.
Yeah, Russell Simmons dropped a little IG live. You know, Russell Simmons, you know, Def Jam and all of that. And he talked about that, and he had some interesting perspectives on it. You know, it was a little bit weird. He did the whole namaste thing and all this, but he said some of this is because some of the areas that Jews in America were able to get into, it's because some of the areas were areas WASPs kind of let them be, or areas that they didn't want to be as involved with. And he had an interesting perspective as he ran it down. But his perspective was, well, when you look at, you know, the black community in America, one of the biggest allies as far as another ethnic group has been oftentimes the Jewish community. And he gave example from civil rights struggle and things like that. It was pretty interesting. You know, these are all real hot button issues to just even talk about, real tense stuff. And, you know, it's new, but it's not new. I mean, there was tensions in the early church, you know, between the Jews who were less Jewish and those who were more Jewish, you know, the Hebraic widows versus the Hellenized widows. And then you had Christians that Peter stopped eating with, that Paul recounts in Galatians 2, or I'm sorry, Peter stopped eating with because, you know, some folks came from Jerusalem, and there's all these things, and it's very interesting. And, you know, all I'm trying to say with what I do when I cover some of this is Hebrew Israelism is not helping. It's only making it worse. Let me just show you one more example how a lot of what Kanye's saying is Hebrew Israelite stuff. And this doesn't mean he's a Hebrew Israelite proper, but he's being influenced by Hebrew Israelism. Esau, Edom, Rome, Dr. Binya Yasharel. I'll just read a little quote here from page 395. It is important to substantiate the color of the people of Israel because Edom, Rome, has replaced the true people of the Most High with the white race of people called the Jews. They are impostors who have stolen the identity of the true Hebrew Israelites. Because Edom, Rome knew who the Israelites were, they described them as they carried them off into slavery as Negro, which is a Spanish word meaning black. In fact, Edom, Rome has always known the identity of the descendants of Israel as they do now. So what they're saying is they knew this book is saying, which is a Hebrew Israelite book. The white Jews knew the true Israelites, and so they've always committed atrocities against them because of that. And I mean, this is a thick book. Look at this. This is a huge book, and this is the kind of thing it's all about. And when it says Esau, Edom, Rome, it's just saying like white folks with the Jews sort of as their head, basically. But this is what Kanye is saying different versions of this, and it's not good.
I think there's a positive in all of this. So Jesus tears down the walls. But here, practically speaking, the world is still very divided during that time. And so you have Europeans over here, and as centuries go on and so on, you end up with generally Christians in Europe and in certain areas of Africa, and you end up with Muslims in certain areas of Africa, and all the way out to through the Middle East and out to Afghanistan and so on, northern India. You have Hindus down in India and in what's now Pakistan and so on. You have different groups in different parts, and for a long, long time, people are staying in areas where most people around them are just like them. And it's now that everyone, especially in places like the United States, everything's getting mixed up, and you're going to run into some problems, right? It's not going to go smoothly when we're all living together now. And so it could be where you actually have people from very different perspectives and so on living in the same area, but also through the internet. Now you interact with people from around the world. And so when we see, people, Kanye having a problem with Jews in the entertainment industry or something like that, or Muslims having problems with the idea that we're allowed to criticize their prophet and so on because we're allowed to do that over here. You have all these cultural differences and so on, and there's going to be quite a bit of tension as people sort of get used to each other. And so we're still kind of in the middle of all that happening. In other words, we're still trying to learn to get along with all these different groups.
Yeah, and again, Christians got to be the light, man. We really do, because we talk about, you mentioned the internet, like the Buffalo shooter. Now, this is a case of clearly anti-black hatred, but that the mass shooter there in Buffalo that went into the supermarket specifically to target black folks, he had to drive really far away from his own residence in New York to go into Buffalo and just started shooting people, just murdered them in cold blood. I read his manifesto, this long, I think almost 200, way over 100 pages. I forget how many pages it was now. Manifesto. I read it actually more than once. It was not fun, but the PDF was accessible. I did a couple shows on this, and he did this thing where he asked himself questions. People are going to want to know, so he would interview himself. And one of the things is he said towards the beginning of the document, if I'm not mistaken, was I didn't pick this up from conversations with real life flesh and blood people. All this that I got, these ideas, which was it's wild, because in the document he says he's going to go target black folks. He specifically says he went there when it's the busiest time, least likely to have security, all kinds of stuff. Like, he was very methodical about his wickedness. But he said, because black folks are closer and I can kind of get to them. This is literally what the document said. But really, Jews are the main problem, but I can't get to them in the same way, but I can go kill some black folks. So I'll do that. It's basically the next best thing is killing Jews, because the document itself was actually more anti-Semitic probably than anti-black, although the murders were, they affected only black folks, that he went after and killed. But in it, he says, I didn't talk to any flesh and blood people. This was all from stuff on the internet. That's what he said. And some people's like, well, we got to do this on the internet and do that and eliminate. I say, I don't know about all that controlling stuff, but Christians should work to have platforms and places where we can speak the truth out and get it out there in hopefully an attractive, clever, winsome way. And that's why I love, what you do and what John does. And there's more and more content creators. I saw Miss Titus too earlier, the work she does. People really doing this, and I think it's a beautiful thing. That's the solution. Is not clamp this down to do this. It's hey, Christians, let's get out there. Let's show the voice of Christ, be salt and light in this culture, because it's true what's happened on the internet. And I bet you Kanye got a lot of the stuff he got. He talks about personal involvement, but some of the stuff he's saying clearly comes from Hebrew Israelite internet activity. That some of the stuff he said. Same thing with Kyrie. He specifically talked tweeted this documentary that was specifically from a guy who's pretty big on the internet circles. You know, people are picking this up from the internet, and that's why it's important what we do online. So I say all that to say this: people, support what David does, support what I do. Our main goal isn't to stand against anti-Semitism per se, but as ministers of the gospel, that is something that we will also do, as we recognize Imago Dei, and as we recognize the Hebraic roots of the Christian faith, if you want to put it that way. We recognize that reality. And so anti-Semitism, and when it really is anti-Semitism is something that we hate and stand against, and we are willing to be, you know, allies, not compromising the gospel, not going to compromise the gospel, but we are about that. And so, guys, the content that we put online is important. So I appreciate people watching, hitting thumbs up, sharing this video, and supporting what people like us do on Patreon. Straight up, because there's got to be a counter. There's got to be some light in this darkness, you know?